So most anyone I talked to this week about our assigned selection of readings was just really overjoyed that Proverbs 31 was it. Love that passage, right? A capable wife who can find. Oh dear Scripture, where is a capable husband who can find, right? If we're going to put it in like the context for back then. Oh dear assigners of the lectionary, there's a whole lot of the rest of the book of Proverbs. Why this one? Thank you. Thank you for picking a passage that for a long time has been used by Christianity and modern Western, broader Western society to put up to a mirror to lots of women to begin demoting how we didn't purchase our vineyards correctly or clothe everybody or benevolently open our hand to everyone. Whatever the list is, right? It's an unattainable list of things. And so I simply took that, wadded it up, and thought, yeah, right. Not me, not Sunday. There's got to be something else. So I put that in the recycling bin. But then I had a moment. Perhaps it was a come to Jesus moment in the strictest sense of that even. I thought, okay, wait. Here's the deal. We actually believe that Scripture speaks to us, right? We have these texts. Part of the reason they're assigned is so that you're just not subject to every whim and fancy I feel like talking about. So if we really believe that's true, then somehow God is speaking through this text. That may make me grind my teeth off, but this is it. And so we have to take it seriously. All right, so here we go. And hopefully I'm not just working out my own nonsense this morning, but I think it might be helpful. So Proverbs 31 is the end of the book. It's all of Proverbs is a bunch of short sayings in general that are meant to teach wisdom. And it's set like this young man is learning how to be wise in the world. And this last chapter is an oracle, it says, from a mother to her son, whose name is King Lemuel. We don't know anything about said mother. We don't know anything about said king, but here it is. We're not sure why it's the last chapter of Proverbs particularly. In the first bit, she's actually giving kingly advice, falling into three broad categories. One, and lovely, watch out what women you hang out with, danger lurks. Might be directed at Solomon, who had some problems in that department. Second, don't drink too much. Those Manhattans, they add up by the end of the day, and you're not going to be very good at ruling if you continue to have them. Lastly, do justice. Because if you're the king and you only rule for one segment of people, that's problematic. And it's after that she moves into this bit about finding a virtuous wife. So placed into that context, it's like this parent who wants the best for the son who happens to be a king, who has to have a fitting partner. So really, in some sense, that elevates this somewhat, right? It can't just be anyone. It's got to be someone who's got a lot of characteristics that will help him pursue justice and do these things. The other interesting thing about the catalog of virtues is that they're not necessarily traditional things that just any old woman would have done in the ancient world, right? They're a little bit beyond that. This woman has some serious entrepreneurial capabilities. She's buying fields, she's planting vineyards, she's making fine cloth, not just for her family, but she's working with the mercantile industry to get that thing, broader appeal, right? She's selling her wares. It's like modern Etsy or something. She's got it going on. She's figured it out. And it's not just that she's entrepreneurial, it seems like she derives joy from doing it. No one's making her do it. She's actually really good at it. And it brings her joy, and it brings her community joy. She's also a strong person. There's a sense of independence in the text. She's doing what she's doing. There isn't someone calling the shots behind her. And she's strong in morality and dignity, but also physical strength. You have the vision of her out there, at least directing people how to plant these vineyards, right? And she's a kind and benevolent person. She's making sure that not only her family's taken care of, but her work, she opens her hand to the poor. And people in the public square notice. She's accruing a good name for herself and her family as a result of her good work that benefits everybody. It's also interesting to note what's not in this litany. Nothing about her physical beauty. Given the Song of Songs and Psalms in general, you might expect that to be no, it's just not what's cared about. That might be a lesson for modernity. I don't know. Second, there's no sense that she derives her worth from her marriage. There's no sense that she is only derivatively valued based on the male to whom she's connected. And third, there's nothing about producing an heir, which you might have expected from like ancient texts about women. All three of these things are missing. But just because they're missing doesn't make this like a daunting text to look at. This woman is burning the midnight oil and she's got like 7 cups of coffee going at like 4 in the morning, right? She's not exactly sleeping. That whole like get 8 to 10, no, because she's doing all these other things. So it's a yardstick that's impossible for any woman and any man and anybody identifying otherwise to measure up to. You can't do it. Which begs the question in the first place if that's what the text is. There's actually a very large amount of scholarship that says actually, it's not quite connected to that same oracle. This is actually about wisdom with a capital W. Wisdom throughout the book of Proverbs is embodied and depicted and symbolized as a woman. Lady Wisdom. So it might be that this young man is sitting taking notes on how to be wise, but he's doing it from wisdom embodied as a woman. And throughout our scripture, there is this strong tradition of this divine aspect of wisdom being presented as a woman in scripture. Proverbs is no different. So, taken that way then, maybe this is not actually, this oracle is not about a real person that can be found. It's about an ideal of wisdom, lady wisdom. In which case, that kind of wisdom is actually more applicable to everybody. So, for my part, I think wisdom is what is on offer from God in a variety of places in Scripture. All of the book of Proverbs. Check out James today. And if you've been in worship, the lectionary has had wisdom percolating throughout it for the last couple of weeks, maybe even a month. So if wisdom is what God offers to everybody, and Lady Wisdom is sort of who we're learning from, then this is a text of maybe how she is that we all can learn from, regardless of how you identify, regardless of how we understand marriage. Because both of those things, gender identity and marriage, how we understand them today, is vastly different than how the composer or redactor of Proverbs would have understood that. It doesn't mean we're going to change the text or manipulate it. It just means we believe that Scripture was written by people in a place and a time. God was speaking through them, and God is speaking to us, but there's only like, I don't know, a few centuries in between that's changed who we are. So I'm not trying to change it or manipulate it, but I think God is speaking to it. And I think loosing it from its gendered bonds is sort of helpful, especially if that's about Lady Wisdom. So what do we learn then from this litany of things that might be helpful to like all of us, however we identify, married, unmarried, whatever? Well, I think the first theme running through it is that wisdom is a grounded experience in oneself. Whatever else you want to say about these verses, it's a person, an entity that knows what they're doing in the world. There's an intentionality. There's a groundedness. There's a knowledge of self that's present in these verses. No, you can't read it, but there it is. And that causes this person to behave in certain ways that benefit them. There's a kindness. Do no harm to the family, right? But really, there's a do no harm to anybody in the text. The actions done are sort of for the benefit of everyone. Not only is Lady Wisdom taking care of like the immediate family, but there's a concern for the servants, right? Maybe your coworkers, maybe the people you bump into here and there. There's also a concern for the broader community, the giving to the poor. That a grounded self walks through the world not centered on self, but giving away. And those verses portray someone who knows their skills and their craft and they're good at it. In that case, it's like fine linens. But it's worth asking, like, what is the skill and the craft you're particularly gifted at that benefits others? Because that's what the text is about. Doing these things in the world that bring joy and that splash over into other people's lives and bring benefit to all. What are the pieces of our lives that bring us the kind of joy God imagined? She's not spinning all this cloth because someone's forcing her to do it. It's clear she's good at it. It's clear that has economic implications that help her family but help her community. What is it the things that we're good at that not only just benefit us and bring us joy, but could bring joy more broadly? And maybe they have economic benefit, but maybe they don't. Maybe they have artistic benefit, maybe relational benefit. But there's also like a sense that there's a benevolence, I guess is what I want to say, a kindness that comes from the way she lives, opening her hands to the poor, a kind of caring about others. That wisdom isn't just about being an independent entity. It's about how we live together. That she's making provision for others. And she's using the tools of the world. I think sometimes when we think about wisdom, it's either presented as like this sage who lives in a cave and eats like, let's say, locusts and wild honey to steal a biblical example. And it's unattainable, right? But the wisdom here is embodied in a person living in the real world, using land to build vineyards, and using ships to send cloth away, and making sure people are clothed. How is it that we use the things in our world, the tangible things, in wise ways to the human flourishing of everybody? We're not asked to be removed from the world. Our wisdom comes from living in the world, from knowing ourselves and knowing others and seeing how we all can flourish together. And I think if we consider those things about this text, it cracks it open in a way that's more attainable. That seems like, yes, these are ideals, but I can get my hand around some of them. I begin to imagine how they might be possible in my life, not as a yardstick that tells me I didn't do all the things this woman did, but as a sense that this is a divine embodiment of wisdom. Where do you find yourself in it? And wisdom is another way of speaking about spirituality. That's what God offers us, a grounded place in God, where we use our talents and our gifts to find joy for ourselves and to help our community flourish. Spirituality and wisdom go together. There's an invitation in the text to consider that in our own life, to consider who we are, how we're grounded, how we are independent in ourselves, knowing who we are, but also how we're dependent on our community, helping others flourish. And I think that might be a much less oppressive, more modern day, but true reading of Proverbs 31.